Muy buenos días a todas y a todos y bienvenidas,
Good morning, everyone,
bienvenidos a
and
esta
may you
serie
all
de
be
diálogos
very
para
welcome to
acelerar
this
el logro de
series
la
of
igualdad de
dialogues in order
género.
to
El
accelerate the
capítulo
achievement of
titulado
gender
Las
equality with
mujeres
the
rurales
title,
en el centro de
with a
las
chapter
acciones para
entitled
dar fin
Rural
a la
Women at the
pobreza,
Center of
la
Actions in order to
inseguridad
end poverty,
alimentaria a través del
food
uso
insecurity
sostenible y el
through the
cuidado de la
sustainable
biodiversidad en los
use and the
sistemas
care for
agroalimentarios de América
biodiversity in
Latina y
agri-food systems
el
in Latin
Caribe.
America and the
Antes
Caribbean.
de iniciar esta
Before
actividad,
we
quisiera
begin this
decir y
activity, I
recordarles
would
que
like to say
tenemos
and remind
traducción
you that we
simultánea
have
del
simultaneous
español al inglés
interpretation from
para
English
que
into
las personas
Spanish
que lo
and vice
necesitan
versa
pueden
for those
hacer
that so
uso
that
de la
those that
misma.
need interpretation may
This event
resort
will have
to it.
simultaneous translation from English to Spanish. So for those who need it, you can use the interpretation service to follow the conversation in your preferred language through the FAO America's website's language system. Este evento ha sido posible
This
gracias al
event has
trabajo
been possible
articulado y
thanks to the
coordinado
articulated and
con mujeres y
coordinated work with
el
UN
UNRWA
Women and
y
the UN Population
agencias del
Fund,
Sistema de Naciones Unidas con quienes
UN
tenemos una
agencies
parcería a
with
través del Plan de
which
Trabajo
we are
Interagencial,
partners through an
justamente para la
interagency work in
aceleración
order
de los
to
derechos de las
accelerate
mujeres y las
the
niñas
rights
rurales de
of
nuestra región.
rural women
Este
and
año,
girls in our
el tema
region. This
priorizado para
year,
el Día
the
Internacional de la
priority
Mujer, que
issue
se
for
celebra el próximo
International
15 de
Rural Women's
octubre
Day that will
y
be
por el cual también
commemorated on
estamos
October
realizando esta
15th and
actividad
for which
interagencial
we
el
are
día de
holding
hoy,
this
es
interagency
las
institution
mujeres
today
rurales
is that
sostienen la
rural women
naturaleza para
uphold
nuestro futuro
nature
colectivo,
for our collective
construyendo
future,
resiliencia
building
climática,
climatic
conservando la
resilience,
biodiversidad
conserving
y cuidando la tierra
biodiversity,
hacia la
and
igualdad de
caring
género
for
y el
the land
empoderamiento de
towards
mujeres y
gender
niñas.
equality and the
Este
empowerment
tema,
of
por
women and
supuesto, que
girls.
refleja
This issue, of course,
perfectamente el foco de
reflects
nuestras
perfectly well
actividades
the focus of our
dentro del marco
discussions
y
within the
poniendo al
framework
centro
and
el análisis en torno a los roles
focusing
cruciales en
our
la
analysis on
sostenibilidad
the
y el
crucial role of
empoderamiento en nuestra
sustainability
región.
and
A
empowerment in
continuación, yo
our
quisiera
region.
darle la
Now, I
palabra
would
al
like to offer the
señor, a
floor
darles de
to
bienvenida a
Mr.
nuestro
to
subdirector
our
general de la FAO y
Sub-Director
representante
General of the
regional para
FAO
América
and
Latina
Regional
y el
Representative
Caribe,
for Latin
el señor
America
Mario
and the
Lubetkin, que
Caribbean,
nos tiene
Mario
unas
Lubetkin,
palabras
to
de
share his
bienvenida a través
welcoming
de un
words
video.
with us via
Adelante, por
a
favor,
video.
colegas,
Please
con el
go
video de
ahead,
Mario.
colleagues, with Mario's.
Es un honor darles la bienvenida a este evento de conmemoración del Día Internacional de las Mujeres Rurales. Extiendo un saludo especial
Today, I
a
would
las
like
mujeres
to
rurales,
send a special greeting
indígenas,
to rural women, indigenous women, Afro-descendant women of Latin America and the Caribbean, and also to my colleagues of UN Women and the UN Population Fund, with whom we have established an important joint work for many years in our region. I would also thank the panelists that will enrich this dialogue with their valuable interventions and visions of the future within the framework of the action plan signed between the three UN agencies. We are promoting actions in order to bridge the gender gap in access to productive resources such as land, water, and fisheries, and expand the coverage of essential services for rural women in the region. Our priority is to acknowledge the fundamental role of rural women in all their diversity within agri-food systems. In accordance with our latest estimations, in 2019, 36% of women at a world level worked in this sector, but faced significant disadvantages, less access to technology and financial services. They were earning on average 18.4% less than men in salaried employment and in agriculture, and devoted a larger proportion of their time to domestic work and for non-remunerated care work. Likewise, climate change is exacerbating these inequalities, having a disproportionate impact upon rural women, limiting their opportunities to implement sustainable agricultural practices. As from the FAO, in collaboration with other UN agencies, we are leading together actions in order to increase the resilience of rural women. promoting transformational gender approaches and strengthening social protection systems. Our objective is to ensure their full participation in decision-making, contributing to a more equitable and sustainable future. Aligned with this effort through the program to accelerate the empowerment of rural women promoted by the FAO, we confirm or reaffirm the importance of investing in their means of life as a strategy to struggle against climate change with a transformational approach. We hope that this dialogue will significantly contribute to facilitate the analysis of the challenges and opportunities in order to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of rural women in agri-food systems before 2030. We must continue our work and consolidate strategies as part of the preparation of International Year of Farmer Women, an unprecedented opportunity in order to bring to the fore the role in food security, the eradication of poverty, the economy, and the conservation of ecosystems. We must act with decision. We are at a critical moment where we must accelerate and guarantee that the participation of women be anyone behind. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a Mario Lubetkin por sus palabras.
We thank Mario Lubetkin for his words that put into context the central issue of this event, which is to commemorate International Rural Women's Day in Latin America, highlighting their role in the reduction of poverty and the protection of the environment in our region. Now, I would like to offer the floor to our dear Nuria Felipe Soria, who is a regional specialist on alliances and mobilization of resources of UN Women for the Americas and the Caribbean, who will also share some opening words with us. So welcome, Nuria. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor for UN Women to welcome you to this event within the framework of the commemoration of International Day of Rural Women. I thank the Regional FAO Office for Latin America and the Caribbean for the organization of this event in alliance with UN Women and with the UN Population Fund. I would like to convey my greetings to Mr. Lubetkin, Subdirector General of the FAO and Regional Representative for Latin America and the Caribbean, and likewise all panelists, men and women that accompany us today. I believe it is crucial for us to hold this event in order to share reflections and community proposals of rural women and their organizations to bridge gender gaps associated to poverty and food security via the sustainable use and the care of the biodiversity in agri-food systems in Latin America and the Caribbean. As from UN Women, we're fully convinced of the fundamental and vital role of rural women in society. Rural women play a fundamental role in the production, supply, and the trading of food, and also the preservation of knowledge and traditional knowledge, and the conservation of the environment and the mitigation of climate change. Rural women also guarantee the food security of their communities and help them to be poised before faced with climate change. Now, we need to better understand the reality of care within this context. Within this rural context, the territory as a social, physical, and symbolic space is fundamental in order to understand the needs of care work, and we must have an intersectorial approach. Factors such as distance, the scarce presence of state services may mean that care work depends more heavily on families and within families upon the shoulders of women. Within this context, community initiatives may arise in order to resolve collective care requirements, and that is the analysis of these community experiences that may help us to obtain lessons that contribute towards the design and implementation of public policies and care services. As from this perspective, I am fully convinced of the need to link community care in rural areas with the care for the environment and for the planet. As mentioned by Mario, women and girls are among the most severely impacted as a result of the persistent inequalities and their greater vulnerability, especially in rural areas. And I'll share some data with you in accordance with this year's report published by UN Women, the Gender Snapshot for 2050. If we think in the worst of cases in terms of climate change may force into poverty at a world scale up to 158 million women and girls within the world threshold of poverty of around $2.15 per day. If we consider the threshold of $3.65 per day, that figure increases to 310 million. And it would be 422 million if we consider the segment of 6.85 US dollars per day. This is data that is included in this report, the Gender Snapshot, that you can find in the UN Women webpage. And so it's important for us to listen to the voice of rural women and of their organizations. Again, we have mentioned some data at an international level, and even if more than 70% of agricultural policies related to the role of women, only 17.9% deal with gender inequality or gender equality or the rights of women as explicit political objectives, and only 13% promote the participation of rural women in when it comes to the design of policies. This is data that comes from that same report that I mentioned beforehand, the Gender Snapshot. At a regulatory level, for example, the conclusions of the Commission on the legal and social condition of women that we all know as CCUV in its 62nd session held in 2018 on challenges and opportunities in order to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of women in rural areas. Well, those conclusions continue to be valid, and they must shape the work that we undertake as from various fronts. So, for example, the strengthening of the regulatory and legal frameworks of public policies for rural women. In other words, we are talking of legal regulations and public policies. Secondly, economic and social policies for the empowerment of all rural women and girls. And what is also extremely important is the strengthening of the collective task and the leadership of rural women and girls and their participation in decision-making. I conclude this with a message full of hope. The Inter-American Decade for the Rights of All Women and girls in rural areas of the Americas that is already a reality provides us with tools in order to transform these previously described realities. This decade is an initiative promoted as from 2012 by the LAC network, which is a regional network on risks, emergencies, and disasters for Latin America and the Caribbean. That was approved on the 23rd of June 2023 by the Organization of American States. And that is a major reference point. I conclude by requesting that this International Day of Rural Women, that during this day we vindicate equality, that we can together build a generation of equality in rural areas where women can enjoy the same opportunities as men. For that purpose, you can count on the commitment of UN Women and of the UN system for rural women in this sphere. Thank you very much. And again, it's a great pleasure to share this event with all of you. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, querida Nuria, por tus inspiradoras palabras.
Thank you, Nuria, for your inspiring remarks. This region, of course, is still at the leading edge compared to the needs of women and the way women associations are driving specific agendas, such as the decade of rural women, the Organization of American States, or the International Year of the Women Farmer, or the Beijing reform, where we want the report to bring key information on women's situation, particularly because we're 5 years to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Therefore, we need to speed up the bridging of these gaps in the region, as well as completing the 2030 agenda, which is robust in terms of equality. We follow the agreements and the support we're offering the countries. Well, let's start with the
conversatorio
technical discussion with our panel members. I'd like to thank these women in the session today, leaders from Latin America. They are Afro-descendant, indigenous women leaders, which are now leading in the region, as organizations such as the COP16 in Cali, Colombia on biodiversity, but also for the next COP29. And for that, this opportunity, it's where as UN agencies would like to discuss with you through some questions that will allow us to find out what is that you are doing at these organizations in Latin America. So let me, besides starting this dialogue with our speakers, let me ask the audience to participate with us in this discussion through a question, which you may answer through the chat pod. What do you think are the main challenges and opportunities for rural women in 2024 and before 2030? So I'll ask you to share with us in this discussion. And while we listen to our speakers, which is, I mean, we can ask your questions using the chat pod. And in order to use this chat, you have to make sure that you're following this event from the YouTube platform, not only FAO Americas. Otherwise, you will not be able to use the chat. So we expect from you your questions so that you can be part of this event. Let me now, after this invitation to answer your questions, to start the presentations of our speakers. I'd like to thank you all for being here. We hope you can share your experiences and reflections. The order of intervention will be in alphabetical order. So we will start with Amelia Reguino, the Women's Caucus of the Convention of Biological Diversity. Amelia, it's a pleasure. Within the framework of the agreement at this COP16 on biodiversity, next November in Cali, Colombia, seeks to achieve, and also looking towards COP29 of the Paris Agreement, what is the appeal of the women's organizations that you represent? What's your call? Amelia, you're recognized. You have 5 minutes. We will have 5 minutes to answer your questions. Thank you, Claudia, for your kind invitation and for your question. Let me start saying that the main goal of the fellow women in this collective, like you said in your opening remarks, the idea is to find action. For us, COP15 on biodiversity, a plan was adopted with clear commitments, with a specific goal, requesting the implementation with a gender perspective in order to guarantee equality. So what we request from this COP is action. The agreement is already there 2 years ago. What has been done? What has been the progress? For COP16, countries will now submit their national strategies, telling us how, out in the territories, they will be implementing this global agreement. And our request is that as a specific goal was adopted in terms of gender equality, we need a national based goal, not just for the sake of an agreement, but as part of the SDGs, as part of the Beijing platform. What we demand are resources for implementation, funding, people, dedicated people, having an action plan for gender. It's a progress. Having this specific goal as part of the CBD, but without staff, without funding, without the political will, this will be just a document. So that is our main call. We have heard that this COP is called COP of implementation. This is when these national strategy will be submitted, and we would like to see that actual commitment, not just words, but real actions, real actions that can prove that progress is being made. We've had the opportunity to discuss with some countries in preparation to COP 16. Some women have discussed us the process so that their voices were included, their proposals, not just the voices and opinions, but proposals to become part of these national strategies. In some cases, such as Colombia, where there was a series of events out in the territories in order to collect those priorities and how women believe these policies should be implemented locally. We're now listening from other countries that are in the preparation of national indicators to measure progress. That's another big question to be discussed as part of COP 16 within the framework of monitoring of a global biodiversity framework. And for us, it is also relevant for two things. In order to bridge this knowledge gap, we've all heard that there are not disaggregated data in terms of environmental information as well as gender. So one of the big requests, one of our big demands is that this monitoring framework aiming at considering the progress, measuring the progress of all 23 measure goals, includes desegregation in order to bridge that knowledge gap that should contribute to decisions in order to make well-informed, evidence-based decisions. But this monitoring framework is also key for us because this is a mechanism for compliance. We know that the CBD, as well as many other agreements, are that good faith agreement. There is no mechanism forcing countries to implement such agreements. It's just the will from the states in order to move forward with these agreements. So what we see is that monitoring framework could become this tool to allow all of us stakeholders, countries, but especially us, to supervise, oversight the implementation of Goal 23 and the Gender Action Plan, and towards COP29 on climate change. The demands are quite clear in terms of the climate change gender plan, which will be reviewed. The current plan will be reviewed and we'll be discussing a new plan. And there's lots of convergence with the CBD gender plan, the gender plan of the desertification plan, as well as the main guidelines from Beijing, as well as the general recommendations. So what we demand are synergies. We know that environmental policy and gender equality policy should be coupled. At the end of the day, all these policies and actions are implemented out in the territories. And the very same women are contributing to the implementation of these multiple programs. So what we aim at towards COP29 on climate is that when we define this new action plan, to think of those synergies and things that the CBD gender plan has, which is a specific clause where, well, we're not inviting, we're demanding the eradication of gender violence within the context of preservation and environmental policy. That is something we would like to see towards COP29 to discuss these common agendas, which is a negative crossing of agendas because it's producing stereotypes of violence. And what we want is to have an active role from environmental agreements, recognize that these dynamics are there, are true, and not see that as a human right or a human issue, which is and without of the environmental agreements. I would like to stop here. I don't want to exceed my time, but this is what we want: action, be able to measure progress as part of the action, resources for actions to take place with a clear perspective of what are the needs from an intersectional view so as to make specific decisions for each context. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amelia. You have made an excellent summary at the end, and therefore I would simply like to highlight that indeed our region is a region at the forefront in terms of agreements and agendas. However, we also face a tremendous challenge when it comes to the implementation, monitoring, and follow-up. Undoubtedly, that is one of the situations, and considering our commitments and our challenges in Latin America and the Caribbean, so that we can make that leap towards the 2030 agenda. So thank you, Amelia. I hope we can have a few minutes left at the end for a second question. You provided us with a very clear answer. Now I'd like to offer the floor to Carmen Nurse, who is a representative of the Caribbean Network of Rural Women Producers, CANROP, as many of us know it because of its acronym.
How are you? It's our pleasure to be here. That you are here with us in this event. And I have one question for you, Carmen. How do you perceive the inclusion of rural women's proposals, particularly those from Afro-descendant communities, in public policies focused on poverty reduction and food security in our region? What areas of opportunity do you identify based on your experience and your leadership in your region? The floor is yours, Carmen.
Thank you to FAO and all concerned for the inclusion of CANROP into this discussion. In a capsule, let me just say a bit about the history of CANROP. CANROP formation came about as a result of the heads of government, the wives of heads of government, accompanying the husbands to meetings in the Caribbean. Being there and seeing that they decide to organize already existing groups into one. And since 1999, there was a launch of CANROP. And so from then up until now, we are in existence. So that's how it was formed. It was the wives of heads of states, seeing the need to women to come together to unite as an organization. And our focus, the vision, is to improve the status and awareness of CANROP members through training, cultural exchange, and development of business sense and their personal and family benefits that of the entire network. Now, to answer the question, I perceive this invitation as beyond an invite to speak, but as a wake-up call for women and their organization to submit proposals to government and other international donors that focus on poverty reduction and food and nutrition security. The Bible tells us the poor we would have always with us, but we ought to give generously to them. And I'm happy that we are looking at poverty reduction and not eradication, because there's no way we can eradicate poverty. We can just
Carmen, Carmen, are you there?
Sorry.
Yeah. Now,
yes, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
We cannot eradicate poverty. We can reduce it because eradication deals with mindset. Our alignment for national and regional goals are critical for the organization's success. A shift in focus, in government focus to small business development would assist in the recovery and strengthening of the economy at a faster rate than it would if traditional large companies remain the main target. Imperial data shows that small business employ more than 15 to 20% of workers. And since one of the goals of the regional government is to create more jobs, it would be wise of government to focus more on the growing number of women, particularly rural women and their organizations who have engaged themselves in micro and small business sectors that are environmentally friendly. Jobs are more easily created in the small business environment. It is a known fact also that a high percentage of households are women with responsibility of caring and providing financially for their children. Any support that seeks to directly increase the family income base has a greater multiplying effect in raising the level of quality of life, thus mitigating some of the social ills that would make reference to poverty. Once women, and particularly young women, are aware that supporting policy legislation is in place to encourage them to start their own small businesses or to invest in existing ones, there should be spontaneous growth in organizational membership, reduction in poverty, and food and nutrition stability. We maintain the culture in agriculture. We eat what we grow. We grow what we eat. We buy local, and we eat more from farm to table notion. Presently, as we speak, there is the strike with the container workers. Just imagine our food source is in those containers, and we don't know when they will arrive in our countries. So the focus on the farmers, our rural women, development will be the way forward, will be the way to ensure that we have food and nutrition security right at home and right in our region, and it's also a way of saving the foreign exchange. So we are producing, so the investment now is in our own. Invest locally, invest regionally so that we can produce. We have the ability to produce because we have the land, and the Bible also tells us for as long as the earth remains, there will be seed time and harvest. Despite the impact of climate change, our women are persistent. They continue, they get up and they go again, because that's the means of income, that's the livelihood. And there is succession because within the family, the members are involved in what they do. What areas of opportunity do I identify? The formation of vertical ties with government and other international actors. Greater negotiation power, advocating for community and what community needs and not personal, not basically personal needs. More favorable transaction conditions in terms of our ability to manage projects. So often projects come to government and then there is a delay. Then there is they have to go and change time because they did not start the project on time. So the implementation is delayed, and so we don't get timely access to what we need. But if that power is given to the Rural Women Organization, we will make it happen on time, and we will ensure the right people get access to it for the improvement and development. We also see the opportunities for access to more markets, because with increased production, we can be supplying the schools, hospitals. We have more exchange among the region in terms of the produce. So there's a market exchange. There is this plan to have this ferry in the Caribbean so that where their supplies are, we can transport it. So we are eliminating or reducing, not eliminating, but reducing the poverty and the need for food and increasing the food and nutrition security. We also look at our involvement with government should give us access to land, to tools, to technical support, for specialists, so that we can move to the next level in terms of our development and increase. We also see it as an opportunity for greater influence over other organizations. Our connection with government should give us greater influence, greater trust by the public on the quality of product. So often we are eating what we assume is healthy, but they are so highly chemical that they are just the food, but they don't have that what will give us the food and nutrition security that will avoid the non-communicable diseases that is very prevalent in the community.
Dear Carmen, un minute more, please.
Thank you. Yes, I'll get there. I'll be on time. Investment in the organization for capacity building, where we are looking at the growth and development of individual persons with individual business, and also for the network and organization. We look at economic empowerment, knowing that money answers all things. We are here because we need the money for the development of any of our organization and even for the implementation of any of our projects. And finally, as a result of all this opportunity, we see that there will be an increase in membership for the organization, knowing that together we can achieve more. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen, for your enlightenment words. And I will switch to Spanish, but you have the translation service in your computer. And bueno, en resumen, digamos, Carmen.
Well, in summary, Carmen mentioned the main gaps experienced by women in the Caribbean at present, the issue of access to land, decent work, market access, access to technical assistance services, especially among rural producers, the issue of training, the issue of support for the ventures of women in our region in order to promote the economies of our region that is so fundamental. And Carmen clearly summarized the fact that all these gaps in terms of access at different levels, especially for rural women, must become public policies in the Caribbean sub-region. And as from here, as from the UN, and including the agencies collaborating in this event, we have entered into an important commitment with governments in order to strengthen that framework of public policies in rural areas, and especially when it comes to the specific situation of rural women in our region. Okay, after Carmen's presentation, whom I would like to again thank, I have the pleasure of introducing to you a very dear woman. And with her, by introducing her, I would like to introduce or highlight the importance of all your predecessors, EPSI. All our women, our Afro-descendant women predecessors in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's a great pleasure to have you here in this event. You're a well-known person because of the leadership that you have and what you represent in our region. And at present, she plays a very important role within the UN system, which is because she is a representative for Latin America in the permanent UN Forum for Afro-descendants. So I would like to again welcome you, EPSI. It's a great pleasure to have you here, and I would like to ask you a question.
You will probably adding several elements, but I have a question for you. And how can international organizations and governments support the call made by women's organizations in the context of COP16 and COP29 and other international agreements which we're trying to apply and implement in our region and globally? EPSI, you're welcome.
Muchísimas gracias. Muchas gracias por la
Thank you very much for your kind invitation. I'm really pleased being here. First of all, I'd like to commend FAO, UN Women, the UNFPA, for these such a relevant dialogue focused on rural women, Afro-descendant, indigenous, those involved in agri-food systems, rural development, also facing particular gaps in terms of social, economic, and political inclusion. We're talking about a challenge which is huge. Thinking that the United Nations, it's just an umbrella allowing us to, thinking of the SDGs, but also thinking of the impact into the future, a much greater commitment with much greater scope, looking at what are the paths and how COP16 or COP30 may turn into very important opportunities. We all know, and this has been said, but the need to access to education, access to economic empowerment, access to productive resources such as land, but also credit, loans, training, markets. But let me say that the international organizations have an important role to play. Let me say that the investment we're making on women is for development. This is an investment that acts as a multiplier, as shown by data. Data says that if we invest there, we will have a much greater payback. And the conditions of rural women, particularly, demand us to think that if we want to reach gaps, if we want to restore, what we're thinking, we understand this, but if we think of inclusion of Afro-descendant and indigenous women, we have to think of at least a couple of things. Let me say that there are multiple strategies to be considered by the international organizations, but let me say that the first I would like to refer to is funding and resources. By funding, I mean not only financial resources, but also resources that will allow to open doors for indigenous Afro-descendant women. But we also need clear policies within international agencies with goals, with specific resources, and with accountability, allowing us to really understand that this is not just a statement, but this is part the international organizations are doing. The other element is to continue to strengthen training according to what women have identified as a need. They have a crystal clear idea where the weaknesses are. And that's why the engagement with the rate of rural organization, indigenous and Afro-descendant women, it's critical to continue to work. The fourth proposal is to continue to work on data. Data show size of the challenge we have ahead, and those data require race, class, geographical location, age, allowing us to move forward to learn where the policies should be located, as well as programs. Number five is the building of networks and alliances to facilitate conditions so that the rural women can build their own strategic alliances and networks. That's why I like to congratulate this opportunity, because this is exactly what it is doing, building these networks and alliances. Number six, platforms in order to listen to rural women. In COP16 and COP30, we need rural women to be there, to be part of the most important debates, to interact with those who are making decisions, but also for us to see them, so that it's not just a picture saying that what they want and how they want it. Offering them an opportunity to speak out, it's important. And I have three more specific proposals. I believe international organizations have to promote sustainable projects with a cultural view, leveraging the knowledge women have, not just say that the knowledge comes from abroad. There is a knowledge which has been built by generations, allowing us, and many of the natural resources and biodiversity remained in weak conditions, but they're still there. So sustainable projects should recognize that ancient knowledge. Focus on human rights related to indigenous, rural, and Afro-descendant women. It's critical. Uh, uh, Raise awareness among international organizations, with other international stakeholders, with other multilateral agencies, with philanthropy, private businesses. Thinking of SDG 17, this a relationship. All the industries and sectors, but the rural women at the center, and intersectoral work to collaborate in multiple areas, including healthcare, education, rural development system, in order to address structural inequalities in multiple dimensions. And just to, those are a couple of points. Power and protagonism of rural, indigenous, and Afro-descendant women, it's critical if we want to achieve the goals, but also it is also a right, because we are citizens who are promised equality and non-discrimination in our constitutions, in every agreement and international agreement. So thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias a ti, querida
Thank
Epsi,
you,
por estas
dear
palabras tan
Epsi, for these
claras.
clear
Estas tres
remarks,
propuestas
and
están en
these
el
three
corazón de las
proposals, which
necesidades
are
que tenemos en este
at the
momento
center of
también
the
en
needs
términos
today,
de
also
augurar
in
y
terms of
sostener políticas públicas
supporting public
específicas para las mujeres
policies
rurales. Esa
for rural
interseccionalidad y
women,
esa
this
intersectorialidad que se
intersectionality and
requiere para ir adelante con
intersectoriality
todas estas políticas
to move ahead
en el
with
marco
these
de los
public
derechos
policies
humanos, ¿no?
within the
De las
framework
mujeres.
of
Así es que te agradezco mucho
women's
esta primera
human rights.
entrada,
Thank you
digamos,
for this first
en
approach.
este conversatorio, y me gustaría mucho
And
pasar ahora
Now let me turn to Luz Haro. She is the chair of the Network of Rural Women of Latin America and the Caribbean, REDLAC. Along with REDLAC, she has been leading this call to the internationalization of the decade of rural women, also making an influence on the decision-making of global agenda. So welcome, Luz. She's a FAO partner, as well as with other agencies such as the UNFPA and UN Women. So what has been, how has the role of rural women in biodiversity management and food security been evidenced? And what actions should be taken to accelerate and consolidate these changes? Welcome, Luz. Floor is yours.
Muchísimas gracias, querida
Thank you,
Claudia. Gracias
Claudia.
por ese
Thank
trabajo
you
coordinado con las
for
otras
that
agencias
coordinated
por
work with
mujeres
the other
y el mejor
agents
esfuerzo
such
en
as
Centroamérica. Sé que a su
United
mando
Nations
causa las
Population
mujeres
Fund
rurales.
and UN Women.
Mi saludo
Glad
cordial
to
y la
see
felicito
that the
como
UNFPA
científica
is
mexicana y
joining
secretaria de la
this
Red
women
Latinoamericana y del Caribe de
network.
Mujeres Rurales.
As a
Que
proud farmer and
precisamente
member
como
of these
estás mencionando, hemos
of
sido las proponentes de la declaración de la
REDLAC,
década de las
as you
mujeres
said,
rurales.
we proposed this
Justamente desde
statement
2012. Un sueño mío loco desde el 2006 y desde el
2012. I
tercer
started to
encuentro
think of
latinoamericano
this
lo
in
hicimos con
2006.
470 mujeres rurales
We met
en
with
serio desde
270
ese
rural
encuentro
women
en
in the
Ecuador
third meeting at
el 1 de
Ecuador
marzo de 2012.
between 5 and the
Y
9th
luego
of
estuvimos
March in
también en el
2012. And then
2018
in
tres minutos
2018,
desde la
we
W2CSW de
attended
Nueva York haciendo comunidad de
in
la
New
Declaración de
York
Mujeres Rurales con un justo
to
resarcimiento a los
request
antecesores
this
coloniales.
rural
Entonces, ¿qué
women
hemos venido
decade.
haciendo? Claro, para
So
nosotras las mujeres,
for
ahí con todo
us
el respeto lo digo a
women,
ellas porque soy
with
una
all
parte
due
de,
respect, I'm
para
part of this.
nosotras las
For
mujeres
us,
rurales,
rural
campesinas,
women,
agroproductoras,
farmers, producers,
artesanas,
mi
saludo, por
artisans,
cierto,
and
estamos empezando
we
octubre, este primer día
starting
en homenaje al Día
October,
de las Mujeres
and
Rurales.
this is the day of
Saludo
rural
a mis
women.
heroínas,
I'd like
desconocidas,
to
invisibles, de cada una de
greet
las comunidades
our
rurales a lo largo y ancho
invisible
del planeta y de nuestra América Latina y etcétera.
heroes from Latin
Entonces,
America and the
claro,
Caribbean.
se ha avanzado de alguna manera.
We've
Ni siquiera sabíamos
made
que
progress.
iban
We
a
didn't
haber
even
estos acuerdos
know
internacionales. Yo
there
soy
were
una dirigente
international
o
agreements.
organizadora
I've been
desde los 80, haciendo
working
la
on
primera
this since
escuela de
the
formación de
80s in the
lideresas
first
desde
school
1995
to
en el
train
continente,
leaders between
con lo que hizo ONU
96 and
Mujeres con
97
UNIFEM en el
with
Ecuador y para poder
UN
avanzar.
women in
Entonces, el
Ecuador.
trabajo que se ha ido haciendo ha sido
So
muy
what we have
arduoso porque no han
done,
habido
it's
realmente ni las
very
capacidades de los
hard
legisladores de tomar
because
toma de
we haven't been
decisiones muy
heard
fuertes
by decision makers.
y no las mujeres, pero claro, luego supimos que ha
But
habido la
then
reunión de
we
Beijing y todo lo
learned at the
demás.
Beijing
Pero las mujeres
meeting,
latinoamericanas y del
but
Caribe,
then
gracias a Argentina,
red
nacen
flag
justamente por el deseo de que
was
nosotras, las
established
mujeres de a pie,
because
las mujeres
us
descalzas, las mujeres, muchas de
women,
nosotras analfabetas, como
rural
lo es mi
women,
madre, y yo pude haberme quedado también
I
semi-analfabeta con 4 años de escuela primaria.
I only
No
attended
hemos
4 years
tenido
of the
las
school.
oportunidades de
We
estar
haven't
en
had
las
the
grandes escenarios y
opportunities
por eso
to
Vanessa
attend
Rosita,
these
nuestra
big
fundadora,
meetings.
crea
That's our
este grupo de
founder
lideresas, la
puts
Red
together
Latinoamericana y del Caribe
these
Mujeres Rurales,
red
REDLAC.
flag,
Con
these
REDLAC,
network of
permanente al
rural
inicio,
women of
desde
Latin
muy
America
grande, hemos
and the
hecho
Caribbean.
5 grandes encuentros
With that,
latinoamericanos y
we
del
have
mundo
had
de mujeres
5
rurales
Latin
y
American
el último
meetings,
lo hicimos en Chile el
and
año
that the
pasado, del
last one was
24
in
al
Chile
28 de
from
abril, ¿no?
between
Pero
in
también
April
hemos venido
24th to
empujando
28th.
positivamente
But we've also
la
been
declaración de la
pushing
década
the
y a
declaration
partir
of the decade, and
de la pandemia
after
empezamos
the
a pesar de las
pandemic,
mil brechas de desigualdades, porque en la
despite
ruralidad no
the
tenemos la
inequalities
conectividad
in
del
the rural
Estado, en
world, we don't have
Ecuador 16%
connectivity. In
de la
Ecuador, it's
conectividad
only
del Estado, y
16%
así en la mayoría de los
state-owned
países
connectivity, as well
latinoamericanos.
as in
Y
most
sin
Latin
embargo nos
American countries.
arriesgamos a hacer las
However,
primeras,
we took the risk
la primera del
of
2020, el 15 de
hosting
octubre, que les
webinars
llamamos
in
Mujeres Rurales
2020.
Alimentando al Mundo.
Rural Women
La
Feeding the
segunda,
World
el 15 de
was the
octubre del
name. And then
2021,
in
decidimos lanzar el
2021,
inicio de la década con nosotros
we
el presidente
launched
en un acto de
the
incidencia.
start of the decade.
Y para eso, para no estar solas,
And
nombramos
so as
embajadoras
not to be
internacionales de
alone,
la década de las
we
mujeres rurales
appointed
y nuestros padrinos. Que
ambassadors
gracias a la
of the Rural Women Decade. And thanks to your support, as well as the support from other ambassadors, such as Maria Noel from UN Women. Now we are using the Panama government to take our declaration for the decade and for the rights of women in rural environment in the Americas. 2024, 2034, we're running. Also, they appointed the Inter-American Day of Women, which is April 17. So I believe, and going to the second part of your question, how should we move forward? We believe this decade, as part of the SDGs, the 2030 agenda, from FAO and from other agencies such as UN Women, UNDP, and the United Nations Population Fund can help us pressure states to raise awareness among governments for them to understand that they have to look into deep rural world. That's where women are lacking goods and services, where we don't have opportunities. However, we are the guardians of life, the guardians of natural resources, the guardians of seed, the guardians of healthy food for the world. So we are a development pillar, and that's why governments and states should support and guarantee the compliance with all these international agreements, as well as the SDGs as an umbrella of this decade. So we want clear public policies, programs, projects to put rural women at the center, over and above the color of our skin, Afro, indigenous, or white, working out in the fields. Also, in fishing and collectors. That's a huge contribution we offer. So we want to be considered in the programs, plans, and projects, not just to support on the closing day of the project, but also be part of the project implementation to strengthen public policy. But also, we, together with that, would like to strengthen the networks of women. And here in Dominican Republic, we've been working on the bylaws to put together the rural women network in Dominican Republic. This is being done in Peru and Panama, as well as in Chile. And we want your support because together we can move farther. Maybe a little slower, but we can get better results. The network groups, organizations on women from agriculture and agricultural production. So this decade has to be this swing, this reason, so that decision makers can have a tool to do things. Some people used to say that we could hardly speak. They don't even know how to say things. I said that in 2009, 2010. Let them to speak with their own voices. We don't want others to think and decide for us. Let us speak in front of you. Give us the opportunity to women, regardless of the color of our skin or age, people like me. But in this diversity we have, that's why then we would like to have this support from you. Help us the way you've been doing to be human rights with rights, such as the FAO motto. And with that, protection of the voluntary guidelines approved in Rome I was asked to be there to raise awareness among decision makers. We have several agreements. We have guidelines. We have the decade, for instance, to expand the scope of women owning land. Once we own the land, we can gain access to loans. But these loans should should not be seen as a regular loan with high interest rates that will prevent women gain access to these loans for agricultural production at the small scale. They're only thinking a big scale, large scale, but they do not think that small producers that little by little build a lot. We need soft loans so that we can have a better life condition than serve urban citizens with better food, healthier food. So, listening to us, having public policies and gain access to all this, but all together with the process, will like investment in human talent, in everything, but in human talent, so that through schools, we can grow together so that the young girls learn how difficult has been the building of these processes, these statements and declarations. Nothing is for free. So young girls have to learn the history so that when they grow up, they have to be aware of this. That's why we believe that the strengthening of human talent in the training of leaders, we could start with self-esteem or community production agreements, or the Ministry of Agriculture should go and see and discuss with the women. So to prune plants or what soil is adequate. I mean,
no ser
I,
grosera, pero decir ausentes.
I don't want to be rude, but the government sometimes are not just not there. They're just absent. They get a salary and they do nothing. So we have to promote technical, human, and public willpower. Luz, we have 1 minute left. As yes, data. We need data, such as the data we collected in 2021 on the rural women situation, where rural women suggested the leaders helping to articulate whether indigenous, Afro, or white, or those who receive and produce in communities. We should collect those data. And now, in this decade, we're building the agenda, but we're also building the agenda with supporting ICA on our own hemispheric red lag agenda. But we need to collect data. Now, this year, at the start of the decade, but we need some comparisons after 5 and after 9 years to see what the growth has been. Since we don't have data, we're still invisible. We are not in the radar of international agencies and care. We are caregivers of life, supporting climate change, how crops are dying, how we don't have access to markets, no public policy supporting women. And when the products go to markets, in the city markets, the municipal police will take the products from us, and we go back empty-handed after years of work. So lots of things, but we need. I don't believe 10 years will be enough. Probably we'll need 10 more years to have a more humane, rational, a more decent policy for us farmers.
Thank you, Luz, for highlighting these issues, for being so emotional in today's event. I take or I go back to several of your phrases that are fundamental. This idea of turning our eyes and our management towards rural areas and towards rural women. The support for rural women, women with rights of the FAO. Thank you very much, Luz. But also this new, and here I would like to announce this, you have already mentioned it, but I would just like to say that the Committee for Food and Nutritional Security within the framework of agri-food systems last year approved the voluntary guidelines for the economic empowerment of rural women and girls. And as from the FAO, together with the decade and together with 2026, but beginning as from now, and we are working via a regional program for the economic empowerment of women, biodiversity, and environmental sustainability. And we are also inviting all the partners that are present in this event to become part of the efforts to implement these voluntary guidelines for the empowerment of the global nutritional food and nutritional security. So we thank you because that reality of women feeding the world is a powerful phrase that we must take away so that they may become effective public policies with financing, as mentioned by EFSI. Well, please stay with us, Luz, because maybe we will have the possibility of offering you the floor for some final comments at the end. But now we would like to offer the floor to our dear Tarsila Rivera, who is president of Chirapac of the Indigenous Cultural Center of Peru. Tarsila, another woman leader who is very impressive in our region. It's a great pleasure to have you here with us, both with the FAO and the UN Population Fund. I have a question for you, an indigenous woman who we would like you to tell us your perspective. How could you summarize the opportunities and challenges faced by rural indigenous women in order to gain access to resources such as land, training, or financing, and how this is having an impact upon food and nutritional security and the management of the biodiversity in your territories? You have 5 minutes, Tarsila, and may you be very welcome. Thank you very much. We have to celebrate the initiative of how to commemorate this day devoted to women, rural women, and indigenous women, also analyzing, reflecting, and making contributions. So thank you very much. Well, after EPSI and Luz, there is very little that I can add. However, I would like to dwell upon the specific aspects that should be taken into consideration when we think of supporting indigenous women. We must think about the intergenerational dimension, because in the rural areas, we find older women and young women, including girls. The second aspect is that we must also take into consideration the cultural context of each human group in accordance with the ecosystem where they are located. And within, in the sense, as from the indigenous women in the South, Andean women who have a cultural practice of producing food, of conserving biodiversity, and this is also related to their surroundings that relates to care for the land, for nature, and lately they have been they have suffered significantly in terms of climate change. So we believe that those aspects are tremendously important, because when we look at the rural situation, we also find the intersectionalities within the intersectionalities that must lead us to have specific policies and projects for each case. We have indigenous women who are very wise, who are often monolingual, and that have a tremendous experience and knowledge of biodiversity, on the use of plants, on production and the care of seeds for feeding purposes. And all this leads us to say that rural world where we find that diversity is also related to the conflict that arises in terms of access and use of territories, where indigenous women, on the one hand, Andean women, with a very strong position against extractivist companies, because there are state promoted concessions that do not take into consideration, for example, a law that exists in order to protect and conserve drinking water that comes from the high Andes, and therefore in areas where communities exist based on drinking water. And if that water doesn't exist, we cannot continue to talk about life, food production, biodiversity, or the production of food or of food sovereignty. In a different context, in the Amazon countries, I would like to call attention to the major conflict and how women also risk their lives in order to defend their territories vis-à-vis foreign agents, be they informal miners, wood traffickers, those that traffic with land. And lately, and I apologize for this, but I am told that in the Amazon, there is also a presence of Mennonites who, interested in the use of land, have also become a threat today. So these women who are defending territories and natural resources and non-renewable resources are exposed to different types of violence. And so this issue is not easy. Access to land and the territory and natural resources for life is important. And when we link this with the tremendous potential of biodiversity in order to grow and live in a dignified manner, considering the possibilities of the transformation of these products for a market, well, again, we find major challenges. How? As from a practice of self-consumption and the productive diversity that was not aimed at the market, we now have to move towards transforming resources available to us for a market and generate economic monetary economics. Those are aspects that are tremendous challenges for indigenous women in rural areas, and there are also conflicts
viene desde Brasil, en cualquiera de los países
that come from Brazil and from different countries as a result of the presence of colonizers. And because the states have enabled this, granting land to agro producers for single crops, because they only take the market into consideration. Now, in the case of Peru, for example, we have the issue of how indigenous territories, Amazon indigenous territories, become desirable for production and the export of fruit, and regrettably, there is a contradiction in terms of conserving, protecting the forest and the natural environment with concessions that are granted to large producers. Now, when we talk about this, we find that there is a need to also relate social actors, women and girls, with what is happening in their environment. And therefore, as from agencies, I believe it is necessary for them to intervene in an articulated manner. What is happening, for example, with the presence of drug traffickers, or as a result of those that desire indigenous land and the lives of young girls. We are finding out that there is sexual violence, violence of different types that benefit from the context in which women live, who are generally outside the formal system of state institutions because they find no support. Well, they find themselves in a more vulnerable situation. And in addition, as a result of the construction of roads, well, new needs arise. And in that sense, if we link the need to continue to protect and conserve biodiversity, both in terms of food and in terms of medicinal aspects, that this food produced in a healthy manner may be benefited and that the community benefits from, well, comes under threat because products produced in cities come to our Sunday street fairs, and children want to eat sweets, and we receive rice that practically has no nutrients. And therefore, we find that our food is replaced by non-nutritious food because the market pays a higher price for quinoa and potato produced in an agroecological fashion. So I would like us to take away with us the idea of considering the full problem faced by rural areas, considering the specificities of indigenous women. Some live, some are still illiterate, but they possess tremendous knowledge that we have to recover so that we don't lose it. In other cases, support, but not giveaways. Assistance programs in rural areas are immobilizing communities because it leads to dependence. However, this must be viewed as an investment that contributes to capacity building. In other words, how can I add value to the tremendous diversity of maize or potatoes so that we don't, so that intermediaries don't obtain all this product, and therefore I don't have sufficient money to make ends meet. 1 minute, Tarsila. Or the use of agrochemicals, which regrettably makes our products not natural, because as a result of rainwater, of irrigation water, those chemicals are also transferred to our crops. So this is an element that we must discuss, that we must always discuss, involving the participation of women themselves in each territory. There is a need to obtain information from bottom up, both for indigenous women, rural women in all their diversities, and also in accordance with the activities that they conduct, because some Amazon women are already talking of how to benefit from the production of cocoa in order to transform economies, but they're not very aware of the market, and therefore we need to support them so that they can develop management capabilities and also to get to know markets and everything implicit in quality control. If we want to introduce economic development in rural areas, well, we must obtain that information from them and within each context, because that is what defines the success of an intervention, that they be full participants and can feel part of the results of that action. Thank you very much. We thank you, Tarsila, of everything that you have shared with us. Well, everything has been very valuable.
Con base en las necesidades de las mujeres
also
indígenas.
Based on the need of indigenous women, I would like to highlight this need to continue to improve the data that we have. That is a crucial aspect. And on the other hand, this idea of continuing to support activists that are defenders of the environment, because in many cases they are exposed to different types of violence. The UN system has also, and within the framework of the Escazú Agreement, has been working on a protocol of care, and UN Women and ECLAC have raised a very powerful voice with regards to this work, and I would like to congratulate those agencies. We have collaborating with this effort because we feel it's fundamental to continue to bring to the fore that type of violence and to hold events and exert influence upon prevention processes of these types of violence. Now I'd like to offer the floor to June Tejedor, my colleague, because I said at the beginning that we wanted to offer the possibility to our public connected online to participate so that they could tell us a little bit how, by a question, how they are viewing the situation of rural women in Latin America, understanding also that many women are connected today, many of them are rural women, many are indigenous and Afro descendants. And I would like to mention the main elements, and we're approaching the end of the event. Thank you. Well, everybody has highlighted the strength of social organizations to promote the rights of women and to coordinate international agreements. What is also highlighted is the importance to strengthen, to implement gender policies in rural inclusion programs, and also to promote greater investment and greater commitment and compliance on the part of governments. Another colleague also highlights the difficulty of being a rural leader considering the male chauvinism in community and the need to strengthen women and create sustainable networks, as mentioned by some of the panelists. And another challenge that is identified is the lack of economic and cultural investment. We also highlight the issue of water and the issue of connectivity in rural areas. Thank you, June, and I thank the public that is connected online today. It's a great pleasure to have you all here with your reflections. I would like to thank our four panelists today for the wealthy and concise analysis that they have shared with us, as from different perspectives, as from different experiences, and also based on the realities of rural women. What is happening with the situation of rural women out in the field, in territories where often public policies are not present, as you well said. Sometimes they do not even receive resources. And this commitment that we have, as from the UN system in this event, that is also reflected in the idea of entering into these alliances and to continue to promote clear public policies and also resources so that we can continue to make headway. I would like us to conclude the event. We will listen to the words of our regional director, but I would like our four panelists today, Amelia, Carmen, Epsi, and Luz, in a single phrase to share with us.
¿Con qué mensaje quieren ustedes
dejar? What would be the final message that you would like to convey during this event, during this commemoration of International Rural Women's Day? This whole political scenario that we find in our region, and also involving international agreements, related precisely to what rural women are experiencing today, acknowledging that you have first-hand information because of your own experiences and because of the work and the spaces that you have inhabited and that you presently have when it comes to leadership around these issues. I would like to again thank you all for your participation. So in a single phrase, what would be the message today for all rural women, for girls and teenagers in Latin America today?
Tómense la palabra como quieran.
Please ask for the floor.
Dale, Epsi, te veo lista.
Epsi, I think you're ready.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Claudia. Yo quisiera terminar con un
Thank you,
mensaje.
Claudio. I would like to conclude with a message that should be very strong. Rural women need and should be considered as protagonists of their own development when it comes to the development of their own communities for dignity, and for that they require power, resources, and programs that can.
Perdimos a Epsi.
Epsi, it looks like we've lost Epsi. Epsi, are you there?
Epsi. Queremos
Epsi, we want
escucharte.
to
Vamos a estar
listen
aquí
to you.
atentas a que conectes
Let's
para
see
que
if you can
puedas darnos
reconnect so that you
ese
can
mensaje
convey
que tú
that
tienes
message
listo
that you
ahí.
have for
¿Ya?
us.
Si quieres,
Now,
pasemos
let's
entonces a
offer the floor
Amelia
to
muy rápidamente
Amelia
lo que
very
Epsi
quickly
vuelve a
whilst
lograr su
Epsi
conexión.
is able to reconnect. Thank you, Claudia, for this opportunity, and I'm very happy to be able to share this session with such distinguished women whom I had not had the possibility of getting to know. I go away very inspired, and that will be my message, to be able to acknowledge the collective strength, as Epsi said, rural women need this, and I was thinking that rural women have this. Rural women are a force, and I am very impressed by Luz's experience. I was thinking of my grandmother who has a similar experience, and to think about this strength that women have, their resilience, but above all, the commitment that we all have, that all our people have, and that all our agencies have in that sense. The responsibility of those of us that have resources and the capability to make this a much fairer world for all. And I'm especially thinking of them. And I say them because I don't experience the same vulnerability, but I acknowledge history. And in my case, and in the case of many of us who are a little younger, that we build upon the experience of all of you. And so I take away this gratitude towards them, and I invite everyone to continue with this commitment and this solidarity. Thank you, Amelia. I love that message, and also the fact that women who are present here today, we all have that historical debt with our predecessors because of the feminist struggle that has been waged, and because we always need to honor them, because we form part of the progress that we have today. That falls upon the shoulders of many women in our region and in the world. Epsi, please go ahead. I would like to leave a final message, and thank you very much, Claudia. Marvelous event, marvelous dialogue. Congratulations once again. And I would like to congratulate you rural women for their protagonism. I would like to leave a message: power, resources, programs, and protagonism for rural women, indigenous and Afro-descendants, for their own personal development, for the development of their communities, and for the development of our countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have you here. Luz.
Muchas gracias, querida Claudia.
Thank you, Claudia.
And estamos compartiendo en este espacio. Yo creo
everyone for sharing this opportunity. We're at the beginning. We're off to a good start with October, which is the month of rural women. Not only the October the 15th is a good pretext, but April the 17th next year will be commemorating the Inter-American Day of Rural Women. So that will be my departing thoughts are that these international agreements, 2030 Agenda, ASDGs, and our decade, which is a blessing. God is with us. Otherwise, this would have been possible to have this decade. And with your support, will bear fruit to change the quality and livelihood of women, to create new opportunities so that not only grandmothers stay out in the field, but also young people, so that they can continue to be the guardians of life, to feed the world, and to be the guardians of water. They say that billions of people will die by 2050. We don't want people to starve to death, but we are right on time. We still have 25 years for SDGs and 2030 Agenda, and together with the Inter-American Decade, which is a struggle from us, women from Latin America and the Caribbean, we can see better days for women, for girls, for adolescents, so they can continue to be the rural women of tomorrow, 10 or 15 years in your communities. Let's not push us out of the field. Every cent invested will always be the best investment. It's like it's so that it will bear fruits tomorrow, not only for us, but also for the cities and the world. Thank you, Luz, for such inspiring thoughts and for taking this opportunity to speak on behalf of the women of our region. Tarsila. And then our colleague from the United Nations Population Fund. Thank you. I would like to states and governments face the challenge of implementing the international commitments and agreements down to the national level, to have a certain consistency in terms of their decisions are those commitments. There are so many recommendations as to the progress of women, but unfortunately, it's still an open issue at the national level. And the second thing is investment for the capacity building with full involvement of stakeholders for a decent life. In this involvement process, you can learn, you can contribute, and you can grow. Thank you. Thank you, Tarsila. And now, Carmen, in the final, Carmen Nurse, for your
Thank you so much.
departing message.
My departing message. Let us continue to advocate. Let us be the voice for the other rural women who will not be on such forum. To advocate is not to disrespect. We must not do it so aggressively, but we must maintain the heat. The heat that, like the sun, the imagery of the sun is a smile. We must do it smilingly. We must not destroy ourselves in the process of advocating for our rural women. Whatever we are seeing now is subject to change. Everything that we are seeing is subject to change. So the vision that we have, maintain it. The vision, the change will come if we continue to collaborate and do what we are doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. And muchas gracias. Quisiera darle las gracias a todas.
Carmen. I'd like to thank everyone for your remarks today and for the strength of the leadership and voices in Latin America. You are still inspiring women for all of us here in roles on the rights of rural women in the region. This FAO UN Women Commitment, our colleague from the United Nations Population Fund, this interagency commitment is a collaborative work message, alliance among agencies to strengthen the work and to speed up the bridging of gaps, which are still true in Latin America and the Caribbean, especially for women, the rural women. In closing, I'd like to offer the floor to Jorge Gonzalez. He is the UNFPA Deputy Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you, Jorge, for joining us. And floor is yours.
Muchísimas gracias. ¿Me oyen bien? ¿Sí?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectamente.
Loud and clear.
Bueno, quisiera comenzar dándoles un saludo
Let
de
me
parte de
start for greetings from the Regional Director, Susana Sotoli. She gave me the privilege of being here today with you. Of course, first of all, a recognition of the International Day of Rural Women. I'd like to thank all the speakers, Amelia, Carmen, Luz, Tarsila, whose presentations allow us to see what's the rural women's situation, learn their demands, and see some of the recommendations to guarantee their rights, overcoming the inequality gaps. Special greetings to Mario Lubetkin, who is the Regional Representative FAO for Latin America and the Caribbean, and Nubia Felipe Soria with UN Women, and Epsi Campbell, former Vice President of Costa Rica. Although it's true that in Latin America, poverty has decreased by 3.8 points from 38 to 29%. This is still part of women. According to ECLAC numbers in 2022, 29.6% women were in a poverty situation, 11.4% were in extreme poverty. These numbers are greater compared to men. 4 out of 10 women in Latin America and the Caribbean suffered some degree of food insecurity. So within this context, from the intersectional approach, we can identify that young women and those living in rural areas are those with the highest levels of poverty, 42.2%. But also, rural women face multiple challenges to gain economic independence and stability. And in middle of crisis, rural women are widely affected by the low access to resources, services, information, and the burden of household work and unpaid caregiving. Our women face challenging discrimination scenarios and inequalities which is worsened by poverty. As an impact of this inequality worsened by the pandemic, severe gaps are seen. For instance, the access to basic services such as water, loans, decent jobs, access to health care, which in the case of maternal health care meant a 20-year delay in terms of maternal death rate, which is increased between 15% between 2016 and 2020. The only one in the planet which is not coming down. Climate change has an impact on rural women. As mentioned by FAO, households led by women have huge losses in the annual average income because of heat stress and floods. The risk of violence based on gender are worsened by natural disaster and climate crisis, which has a specific impact on rural women. What we should not forget is that climate change is not gender neutral. Gender stereotypes and the risk of sexual and violence will worsen the access to fundamental rights of women, those facing discrimination. That hence the importance of this intersectional approach in addressing the rights of every woman, particularly rural women, either indigenous or Afro-descendant. That's why there are two main priorities, like Luz and Tarsila mentioned: political influence and high-level policies to speed up the bridging of gender gaps and access to productive resources, land, water, fishing, training of human talent for food and nutritional security in social conflict environment and political contradiction. This is closely related to the SDGs 2 and 5. And of course, related to funding access, as Amelia mentioned. The second priority, it's promoting rural coverage of sexual sexual health care, and gender violence, production of data and information on rural women using georeferenced and collaborative methodologies, including data on and independence and decision making. In summary, poverty and food insecurity and the lack of access to resources has a big impact on exercising autonomy, hence the importance of recognizing the key role of women and their organizations vis-a-vis climate change, food security, household, and countries. 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development makes an emphasis on the importance of countries pushing measures to guarantee conditions to move forward to the economic, political empowerment of rural women. And that's the only way to achieve progress in all 17 SDGs in the 2030 Agenda. Our organization has set three results, which is to put an end to the maternal death, to put an end to the unmet needs of family planning, and the gender violence, particularly infant marriage, and that likewise from population and development, we are helping countries to make visible the situation of rural women through census, to georeference data, and make the gaps visible by promoting public policies based on evidence. Thus, we will continue to work in order to speed up these results with put women at the center. Let me close by saying that this opportunity is very important on this date to think of the particular needs of rural women and to build opportunities for more articulated work among the UN system agencies, organizations of the civil society, and government, so that together we can have a better, more effective response to close the gaps among rural women. On behalf of a UNFPA, we'd like to renew our commitment and would like to thank for the opportunity to be part of this discussion to build together a society with opportunities for rural women. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a ti, estimado Jorge, y estamos ya cerrando
We
el
thank
evento
you,
del día
dear
de hoy.
Jorge, and we're
Quiero
now bringing
nuevamente
this event
agradecerle
to a
nuestras
close. I would like to again
panelistas, un
thank our
panel de
panelists.
lujo que hemos
This has
tenido
been a
para
luxury
este día
panel
y esta
discussion that
tarde,
we have
y
held today.
decirles a todas y
And
todos
I would like to
que
say
la
to
acción
everyone that
es
the
de cada uno y cada una de nosotros, pero también tiene que
actions
traducirse en esa política
belong to
pública
each one of
que
us,
las
but
mujeres
must
nos
also be
están
translated
demandando.
to the public
Desde la
policies
FAO y
demanded by
junto con el
women. As from the
sistema
FAO
estamos
and together with the
completamente
system,
comprometidos y
we are
trabajando para
fully
poder
committed and
ir hacia
working
esa meta,
towards
hacia
that
esa
goal,
necesidad
towards
en
that
el corazón de
need
la agenda de
that
las
is at the
mujeres
very heart of
rurales en
the
su diversidad en
the
toda nuestra
rural
región.
women's
Yo
agenda in all
quisiera, yo
the
soy Claudia
diversities
Brito,
in
soy
our
la
region.
oficial
I am
regional
Claudia
de
Brito.
género
I
para
am
la
the regional
FAO en
officer,
América Latina y el
gender
Caribe.
officer for
Y la
the
verdad es que ha
FAO
sido un
in
placer
Latin America and the
inmenso estar
Caribbean,
aquí hoy
and it
con
has truly
ustedes, con
been a great
amigas
pleasure to be
queridas que
with you
están en
here
este
today
panel,
with our
pero
dear friends,
también
our
con
dear
estas
panelists, but
potentes
also
mujeres que
with
tenemos el día de
these
hoy acá. Así
powerful
es que
women that are
un
present
gusto.
in
Igual quiero
this panel
agradecerle a las
discussion. So it's
agencias,
been a
tanto
great
al
pleasure. I
para
would
ONU
also like to
Mujeres
thank
y a los
agencies,
equipos que han estado de
UN
manera
Population
invisible
Fund and
trabajando
UN
aquí
Women and the
detrás
whole
para que
team
el
that has
evento
been
del día de hoy fuera
working
posible. Gracias
so
a
that this
nuestras
event
traductoras y
has
quiero
become a
también
reality. I would like
darle
to
las
thank
gracias al
the
equipo de
interpreters and
TI y a todas las
also
personas que
our
han estado involucradas acá. Un gusto. Que
IT
tengan
team
muy
and all
buena
those
tarde.
involved
Es un
here. It's
placer.
been a great pleasure. May you all have a very good afternoon. It's been a great pleasure. I thank all of you that have organized this.
Gracias a
Thank you,
ustedes.
everyone. Thank you, everyone.